Hey everyone. Alright, today's video will be over fractions and decimals. Make sure you write down everything that you see on the screen that is not already in your notes. Your objective for today: I will be able to solve problems involving fractions and decimals. Now, if we see a problem with both fractions and decimals, sometimes we are going to have to convert. So remember, when we change a fraction to a decimal, we put the top dog in the house and divide. So if we had the fraction 1/2, top dog would go in the house, and we would just divide from there. Now, 2 could not go into 1, so I'd have to add a decimal and a 0, and pop the decimal up. Now, 2 goes into 10 5 times, which is 10, and a remainder of 0. So 1/2 would equal 0.5. Alright, now, let's say we have to change a decimal to a fraction. So what I want to do is I want to set up a fraction. Let's say I had the decimal 0.5. I'm going to put 0.5 in the numerator. Now I'm going to put a 1 in the denominator for the decimal. So I look at the decimal, below that I write the number 1. Now I'm going to place a 0 for every number after that decimal. So we've got one number here, so I have to put a 0 directly below it. Now, I'm going to write that without the decimal, so this would be 5/10, which would reduce to 1/2. If you had a decimal like 0.075, you would put a 1 under the decimal, and then you would put a 0 under every number after that, and then you would just get rid of your decimal, so that would be 75 over 1,000, and then you would just reduce from there. Alright, remember, these are fractions and decimals that you should have memorized, okay? So 1/2, that's the same as 0.5, 1/4 equals 0.25, and 1/5 equals 0.2. 1/3, that one's a little different because it's actually a repeating decimal. It's going to keep going forever, so just keep that in mind. 1/3 is a repeating 0.3. Alright, when should we actually convert? Alright, if we are adding and subtracting, then we want to convert and make sure we have only fractions or only decimals. Now, if we're multiplying and dividing, we actually don't have to convert, we just follow fraction rules. So let's do some examples together. Example 1, we have -1/3 plus 0.5. Now we know when we add fractions, we have to have common denominators. Okay, so this is not a fraction. So we could convert this to a fraction, but some of you may be thinking, well, why don't I convert this to a decimal? Well, remember, on this page, we said that 1/3 is a repeating decimal, and we cannot add and subtract, multiply, divide with repeating decimals. We have to have it in the fraction form so that we can get a true answer. So I want to leave this as a fraction, which means I want to change 0.5 to a fraction. So 0.5, I'm going to put that as the numerator in a fraction. Now I put a 1 below the decimal and a 0 below the 5. So that really means 5/10, which we know reduces to 1/2. So I have -1/3 plus 1/2. Now I have to have common denominators. So I'm looking for the least common multiple of 3 and 2, which would be 6. So I'm going to have a negative something over 6 plus something over 6. Now 3 times 2 gives us 6. So whatever we multiply in the denominator, we multiply in the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. Over here, to get from 2 to 6, we multiply by 3. So I multiply by 3 in the numerator, and we get a 3. Now whenever we add or subtract fractions, denominator stays the same. So I know it stays a 6. So now all I care about here is that I have a -2 plus 3. -2 plus 3, negative plus a positive, so I find the difference. So the difference between 3 and 2 is 1, and take the sign of the higher number, and the higher number is 3. So this is a positive 1/6. All right, example 2, we have 0.75 minus a negative 1/5. Now, from the previous page, we know that 1/5 is 0.2. And if I were to actually do 1 divided by 5, I would add the decimal 0, and 5 would go into 10 2 times. So you can see that there as well. So I really have 0.75 minus a negative 0.2. Now, we do not subtract with negative numbers. We add the opposite. So that means I want to add a positive 0.2. So now I have simple addition with two positive numbers. So I'm going to solve that by lining up the decimals and adding. Empty space can be filled with a 0. 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 2 is 9. Bring down the decimal, and that makes 0. Now you may be wondering, because example 1 we got a fraction, and example 2 we got a decimal. Those are different ways to show an answer. Whenever you are working these problems, you're probably going to see answer choices, or it may specifically tell you what form to put your problem in. So just be on the lookout for that when we practice. All right, example 3. We have negative 0.4 times 5 over 6. Now, I told you guys earlier, if we're multiplying or dividing, we do not have to convert. And here's why. We can simply follow multiplication rules. So when we multiply numerators and then multiply denominators. So any number that doesn't look like a fraction, we simply put it over 1. Now, I know you're used to seeing this with whole numbers, but it works with decimals as well. If we put it over 1, that makes it look like a fraction, and then we can multiply. So I want to multiply the numerators. So I have 0.4 times 5, and I'm going to work that out over here. 4 times 5 is 20, carry the 2. 0 times 5 is 0, plus 2 is 2. I have a 1 decimal place here, and none here. I must have 1 in my answer. So that just equals 2.0, which is 2. So this product would be 2, and then the denominators would be 1 times 6, which is 6. And now I'm just going to check Mike Dude. I have a negative times a positive. So this is a negative 2 over 6. And don't forget to reduce. We can divide these both by 2. So you get a negative 1/3. All right, example 4, we have 7.62 divided by a negative 1/2. So I'm going to use fraction rules. Dividing fractions is easy as pie. Flip the second and multiply. Right, so again, to make this look like a fraction, I just put it over 1. So I would have 7.62 over 1 times, and then I want to flip the second. That would be a negative 2 over 1. So now I'm going to follow multiplication rules. Multiply the numerators and then multiply denominators. So let's work out 7.62 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 1 is 15. I have 2 decimal places here. I have none here. So I will have 2 in the answer to get 15.24. So the numerator product is 15.24. Now the denominator product is 1 times 1, which is 1. Any number over 1 we know is just that number, as we have seen here and here in example 3. And this also means 15.24 divided by 1. So it's just 15.24. Now I can't forget I had a positive divided by a negative, so I've got to check Mike Dude. Positive divided by a negative is a negative answer. All right. Another thing you may be wondering is, can I just change the fractions to decimals or change the decimals to fractions and solve it that way instead? Yes, you absolutely can do that. You don't have to. You can leave them this way and just follow your fraction rules, or you can convert. Just remember to be careful, because if you have something like 1/3 in your problem, that is going to be a repeating decimal, and then you can't really solve a problem with a repeating decimal in it. You have to keep it in its fraction form. All right, now it is time for you to try. Make sure you answer the 2 problems and show all of your work and have it ready for us to check next class day.